I got a very special package delivered to my door. The package, which had made its way from America to the UK, contained a signed copy of the recently released book, The Chatham Legacy, documenting the American success story behind the Chatham Company, written by Tom Chatham. The company had been on my radar for several years whilst conducting my research into man-made gemstones, as Tom's father, Carol Chatham, was the first to commercialize the flux growth of emerald. As a young, aspiring chemist, Carol Chatham, passionate about gemstone crystal growth, and even though one of the experiments ended up in an explosion that shook his San Francisco neighborhood, as he continued, he achieved great successes in the flux growth of emerald, ruby, and other crystals in his lifetime. His youngest son, Tom, transformed his father's business into what it is today, and now, upon taking a step back from the day-to-day operations of the company, has written down the stories that formed the foundation of the Chatham Legacy. With crystal growth driving innovations in science and technology, it is surprising there are still some who don't know that we can grow crystals, including the most desired ones. To speak to me about the book, the subject of lab-grown gemstones, and his thoughts on the future of the industry in this area, I'm excited to welcome Tom Chatham. Thank you for joining me, Tom.
You're welcome.
Tom, could you tell me a little bit about your background and your experience in the created gemstone field, and maybe also why you decided to join the gemstone industry and not pursue an apprenticeship at United Airlines, as you state in the book?
Yes. My background is not as unique as many people think. My father was, a true genius and knew what he wanted to do from 10 years on. It was amazing the things he accomplished at 10 and 11 years old. I had no inclinations toward that desire, and I wasn't a great student. I knew my father's work was important. I knew he was extremely bright, annoyingly so sometimes, when I couldn't leave the breakfast table on a Sunday morning because I couldn't solve his brain twister he found in the newspaper. And I'd sit there for hours struggling over it. If I want to go out, I want to go on my bike, I want to. So but because of my father's influence, my education was always based on math and chemistry. He didn't care if I flunked history, got kicked out of gymnasium classes, English, didn't matter. But math and chemistry was all important. And unfortunately, I was not as gifted as he was in math and chemistry. And I didn't realize that. Well, I did realize it while I was in college, second year, and I said, this is a waste of time. I am just not getting it. I'm having to work and struggle to get through these classes. And I had gotten married very early when I was 20. And well, before I got married, I said, well, I got to find something to do. I got to have an earning. And so because of my upbringing with my father, who was very mechanically inclined, fabricator, everything in our laboratories we made. So he kind of passed that on unintentionally, really, but helped us with hot rods, my brother and I, and making things, making parts. It was a great upbringing. And so I was mechanically inclined, and I wasn't gifted in chemistry, but I went to United Airlines to try and to join their group as an apprentice mechanic. And I thought it would be a great future at United. I'm certainly glad I didn't do that. I have friends who did do that, and it was not a great future, unfortunately, because when they went bankrupt, they took with them all of the retirement funds, and the U.S. made laws against that ever happening again. So I went to United and I applied. And when I told them I was married, they said, well, we don't want you. I said, what do you mean you don't want me? I said, well, we don't think you're going to pay enough attention to this program. I says, I need this more than anybody does, any single guy. I said, I've got a responsibility. So they said, well, that's our decision. Then I went to my father and I asked him, I said, I want to come to work for you. And my father had no employees. after his experiences with the Federal Trade Commission and other government agencies, didn't want anything to do with government employee regulation. But he did give me a job, and my background in fabrication helped a lot. He taught me a lot about chemistry and a lot more than I would ever learn in a classroom. And he was truly gifted. And I frequently had to tell him, Dad, just slow down, slow down. This is not as easy to comprehend as you may think. And as we were going through some experimental type of thing, usually problems in chemistry would pop up right and left. And even though we bought the purest chemicals that we could find, there was always something in there that would interact with something else and cause a problem and cause the wrong elements to combine and grow crystals that we did not want, or growing crystals within our crystals, which we definitely did not want. Things like phenakite crystals. So I slowly got good at running the laboratories and then understanding the chemistry. And then it dawned on me after my, I don't know, 4th or 5th year, I said, I shouldn't have been taking chemistry in college. I should have been taking marketing because that's what this company needs. They don't need another chemist. So my father was extremely, he gave me a lot of room, and he didn't fight me on things that he didn't know much about. And so I was constantly challenging him on marketing ideas and how we market our stones and who markets our stones. As I explained in the book, there was one individual that represented us in Switzerland, and we didn't have the slightest idea where our stones were sold. And we knew the U.S. was the biggest market, but it wasn't the only market. And my curiosity led to that breakup because I kept asking questions, and my father never told me to shut up. He liked my desire to learn more and more about the marketing end of the business, which he really didn't have any aptitude for. So that's what got things going. I mean, it was just learning things on the job, experimenting, taking chances. I mean, we always took chances in the laboratory with making changes, which are done constantly to improve the quality of the growth. And I took the same approach when it came to marketing. I didn't know what worked, but I knew what we were doing at the time wasn't right, and it wasn't good for us. I mean, the business was great, and it was dependent on too few people. If anything happened to them or the relationship, we were stuck. So I didn't like that, and I wanted to be fully involved in where our products ended up and how they were sold.
In your book, you sort of mention you nourished this love for engineering mechanics from this young age. Then you gained your chemistry experience from your father. You attended gemology qualifications as well, and then developed the business and marketing skills on the job. If you would speak to really anyone starting out in the industry, what core skills do you feel they need to be successful?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And I've been asked that frequently. It takes a passion for the industry that you're trying to be in. Many people have tried to break into the industry just in general, in the jewelry industry, and they've asked me, what do you think I should do? Should I go to the GIA? Should I go here and learn this? I said, well, I can't say don't get your background in gemology, but it's not going to open any doors for you necessarily. What you want to do is get yourself into some of these trade shows where you meet thousands of people and aggressively market yourself. And I think that's what it takes. I mean, it takes a determined, passionate involvement in where you're trying to go, and a constant learning process. The gemology would seem like so easy to me, and it was like chemistry was to my father. I just, like a sponge, would absorb the information. And people who work for me now, I mean, I haven't been to the GIA in 40 years, 50 years as a student. But people who work for me that have GIA certificates of graduation, they couldn't separate wolfenite from, diamond. They just don't know where to look. They forgot everything. They took the test and they passed, and they didn't learn anything.
Would you say that in terms of marketing, it's also about having a good sort of narrative to tell and creativity, that's important as part of your strategy as well?
Well, it has to do with the people around you as well. I mean, all the ideas didn't just spring out of my head. We always had advertising agencies, and we had some really brilliant people that would come up with ideas. Some of them weren't very good. Some of them were ingenious, and you don't know it until you try it. I mean, we've tried a lot of different methods and messages to the industry in our advertising. And we constantly, of course, had to fight for our legitimacy. We were constantly being called, fake and synthetic, and that's, the common definition of that word in the U.S. definitely means artificial and fake, and we refused to use it. What occurred to me as we started to learn this business that we were assumed to already have been running. I mean, Chatham had been around when I joined him in 65. It had already been around 35 years. And it wasn't entirely developed yet for 35 years. But in the let's say the 10 years prior to my joining the company, it was well established in the U.S. What I did, though, when I came in and shook things up and took over the whole process of reaching the retail jeweler to try and do a better job on each stage of the mission. And that has to do with starting off with cutting. There are a lot of cutting centers in the world that do a pretty good job with natural stones, but doing a pretty good job with faceting was not acceptable to me. And I said, this one of our advantages has got to be our willingness to lose rough and sell the ideal cut stones, because it fits in so much better with the industry. I mean, now it still occurs. Natural stones are cut for best advantage, and you have to make a mounting around the stone. People who have large chains like Signet, people like that with 4,000 stores in the U.S., they can't deal with that. They need 10,000 7x5 octagons. You cannot get that in a natural stone. You can't even get close to it. My first experience was I had an order. We sometimes supplied natural stones. I had an order once for a dozen blue sapphires, 7 millimeters, that had to match. So I went to the natural people that I knew, and I said, this is what I'm trying to find. And they said, oh, Tom, you got to be kidding. It's going to take you a year or two to collect that around the world. I said, are you sure? I mean, are you telling me the truth that you can't match up a dozen stones? I mean, blue sapphire is not like, rare. And they said, yeah, we can't do that. I said, that's the problem you have with my competition, because I can do that. It's not easy to do it. It costs me a lot of rough. You guys get 50% yield. I only get 20, 25. It's a lot of money, but I sell a lot more stones than you. And so that kind of attitude and trying to seek out where we could have an advantage. And I think that's still going on today, like with diamonds, whether it be, natural or lab grown, there are certain areas that are more in demand than others. I mean, let's take a carat size natural diamond. They don't cut carat size natural diamonds. They cut the piece of rough. It comes out 99 points. That's what it is. Comes out a carat 5. They will not cut it off. It's going to be a carat 5. So that attitude of cutting it for your own benefit, your own profit, you think doesn't work when it comes to laboratory created gemstones. I mean, it could work. Some people tried it that way. It didn't work for them. Like some of the first cutters I had, And I tried using natural cutters and it just didn't work. But their performances, when I had the conversation with them, that I said, these stones are not within the parameters that we gave you. I mean, it has to be plus or minus a tenth of a millimeter. It can't be, 7.5.8, type of thing. And they said, well, you just change the price. Well, that's what happens in the natural. You can negotiate on each stone, which is kind of, I don't say complicated, but it slows down the whole process. You can't sell large parcels and that type of thing. So we pay attention to what the industry wants and what colors they want. And we have that advantage chemistry wise. We can control the color pretty much. We can't control the inclusions. I mean, we control them to the extent that we know how to make a better crystal, but we don't know what causes inclusions. People give us far more credit than we deserve in growing crystals. And it's part of the problem because they don't understand. It isn't like, maybe people don't even really understand what a hothouse orchid is either, or how it came into being, or some of the hybrids that are created. They just accept it. It's, oh yeah, same as natural, But when it comes to gemstones, it doesn't work.
So the art and craft of growing gemstone materials was a passion for your father and remains a pursuit of the Chatham business. What is it that is so fascinating, was particularly to your father and then now to yourself, when you're thinking about this natural growth process with which they are created and these materials in themselves?
I guess it's because of our appreciation for what happens in nature. We're looking at, my father explained to me in depth why these large geodes of amethyst form, and how they form and why they form, and how we're recreating that environment to make our crystals grow. And every time we grew a crystal, I mean, after a year's time, it was always exciting to open up a furnace and what happened, I mean, was it successful? Did we improve it at all? Why is this crystal no good on this side of the crucible, and this one over here is flawless? I mean, we never got over that, and that is part of the attraction in that it's never the same. You have some very expensive failures and some accidents that produce unbelievable results that are good. So it is everything. Everything goes into it. It's not cut and dried at all.
No, and this is definitely, as you say, something that people don't expect from man-made, lab-grown, created gemstones, is they think it's all sort of cookie cutter, the same, but that's definitely not the case, is it?
I give them a break. When I say them, it's the natural stone dealers, that they don't have the education I have. So I just, that's a given. And there's no reason why they should. There are some people who do in, let's say, Gem A in the UK or the GIA. These people thoroughly understand what I'm doing, and they appreciate the fact that it is the same as natural. They can't come out and really wave a flag, saying that this is natural or the same as natural, because of what goes on in the industry. A lot of politics goes on in the industry all over the world. And we are looked upon as a threat to their success because they don't know what to do. Like in the diamond industry today. I mean, you've seen it probably firsthand. What De Beers has orchestrated over the last 5 years and how it's come full circle. And they finally took my advice and started to ignore us, because I thanked them. I said, thank you for all the publicity. Because if it wasn't for you guys out there saying that these lab-grown diamonds are no good, they're cheap, they're going to be worthless, you can't trade them in, you can't do anything, you just made people curious. And they went into the stores and asked for this. And it made us incredibly successful. And now they've learned. And I even told them, I said, if you guys just shut up, leave us alone. We don't have a problem today with natural ruby or emerald dealers. They ignore us. We ignore them. Somebody at our recent jewelry show in Las Vegas last June, somebody on a podium giving a talk was asked when the natural diamond and lab created diamond people were going to get together. And I repeated the question during one of my podcasts. I said, we are never going to get together. That is not going to happen. We are two different products, and we can't make believe that we are identical product as far as when it comes to marketing. So it's just not the same. And I think the natural diamond people, I got to give them a break because they never had a competitor, a real competitor. And it was pretty easy for many years. And especially when somebody like Oppenheimer's controlled the whole marketplace and the prices and the supply as they do today, even though don't have an exclusive, a lot of the other countries follow what De Beers does, what they say to do. And they've been very successful at that in sort of leading the industry, the diamond industry, as the matriarch of the diamond field. So, but this has been the lab-grown diamond introduction, especially in the United States, has been sobering, to say the least, for the natural industry.
De Beers are criticized for starting Lightbox and undercutting the price. Is De Beers changing their mind, or is De Beers Lightbox another strategy to sort of segment the product?
Lightbox was definitely designed to be a disruptor when it was introduced. And to give you an idea of how disruptive their introduction was, during one of my trade shows, the trade show organizer allowed the De Beers execs to come in and speak to all of the attendees, retail stores, not other exhibitors, but these are retail stores, on what their plans are for Lightbox and what their opinion was of laboratory grown diamonds. And that's when they came out with this $800 a carat basis. And that was far below our prices at the time. And people came by our booth in the trade show and said, that order I gave you for the diamonds, if you can't make it $800 a carat, cancel it. Well, it's one of the only times we have walked out of a trade show and we just closed up, and the management says, you can't do this. And we said, after you let De Beers do what they did and what it cost us, we're not coming back. So you can't do anything to us. We're leaving. And we never went back. They were disruptive, and they keep coming out with announcements, right before Christmas, that type of thing, that timing. They are very active in Sibjo. They're very active in disseminating, I think, false information, fake news. There's a lot of that goes on about our industry. And I've even warned them. I said, you don't want to have to defend your position in the natural diamond industry, not with what you got going on in Africa. So, if you live in glass houses, don't throw rocks, because you guys have a lot more skeletons than we do. So just back up. I think they have backed up. I think it backfired on them, the fake news that they have come out with. I mean, attacking our sustainability, attacking our eco-friendliness. And our government has stepped in and said, we don't want you people saying things without backing it up. And that's what the Federal Trade Commission does. And they're accurate. I mean, you can't just say you have a green product and not explain it fully. So I have, in my talks, I tell people, I says, if you can't explain it, and I can't, We don't use sustainability, eco-friendly, green washing, anything like that, because I can't back it up. I can't back it up with a third-party observation that would stand up to an FTC investigation. And I've been up against the FTC, and I do not want to do that again. So we just ignore it. I mean, we don't use it, and we advise people not to use it. So, but they have been at work to try and diminish the, what Rappaport used to say, and I don't know if everyone in the UK understands who Rappaport is, the man who invented the price list in the diamond industry. His big deal was the stored value in natural diamonds. And I kept saying, there is no stored value in natural diamonds. I mean, you walk into a store, you buy anything. You buy a Ferrari, you can't sell it back for the same price. So there's no stored value for the consumer. And 1 in a million, if they buy it right and hang on to it for 20 years, if it's a colored diamond or, something unusual, unique, that doesn't count. I mean, the day in and day out diamond business, nobody's going to win. And it's actually illegal in the US to say it's a good investment to buy diamonds. It's not. It's not a good investment, and it's not legal to say so. So I got on Rappaport about that stored value baloney too, because it's just, you have a secondhand diamond and you go to a store to try and sell it. They're not going to pay more than they would pay for it from their wholesaler. So it's going to be less than they can get it for wholesale. So it's a falsehood to say it has that kind of value. I mean, the intrinsic value, what a diamond stands for. I mean, I can't argue with that. That's fine. And we try and write on that too. And it's not just the diamond or where its origin is. It's the significance of the gift and what it's for, what it represents. So it doesn't matter if it's coconut shells or, some other form of jewelry, adornment that is given in that meaningful way, that that's the value of it.
The authenticity is definitely something that you see a lot being used in advertisement now, sort of 3 billion years in the making, or these types of statements. And there's even been a sort of 5th C added into the 4C categories. Have you heard about this, Tom?
I think I have. I mean, I definitely read all of the little news releases that come out of the Natural Diamond Society, whatever it's called. One of the things I have come up with and have rebutted is that it didn't take 3 billion years for these diamonds to form in the earth. I do not argue the fact that they are billions of years old. As a matter of fact, every rock in my garden is about 1 billion years old. So you want to buy one of those? Everything's old here. There's nothing new.
But yeah, the 5th C with it is what they claim to be the certificate. So certificating authenticity. So you're not only looking for perfection in your diamonds, which of course I would imagine lab-grown diamonds can actually achieve a little bit easier than those mined from the earth. Now there is the 5th C that kind of counteracts all the other Cs. If it's not authentic from a mine, then it doesn't matter that it scores well on the other 4 Cs.
Well, then they should tell us what mine it's from too. They don't want to do that. I mean, Canada doesn't mind, and Argyle, when they were open, they didn't mind. They were very proud of their product. But somebody like De Beers mining in Africa and Botswana, they don't want people to know it's coming out of Africa, so they fight it. But I think it's in the U.S. anyway. It's turned into a necessity, a blockchain type of identity, which I'm surprised somebody hasn't made them do it already. That it is very possible to tell where a diamond is from, just as you can tell where any ruby or sapphire is from, or emerald, if you if you do your studies and look at all the sites where they're developed, they all have telltale signs of where they grew.
Perhaps when we talked about sustainability, do you see any future benefits though for lab-grown materials to be more traceable, more sustainable than alternative products? Or do you feel that because of for example, the time it takes to grow, etc., it's hard for this product to ever be sustainable?
Well, I don't think time it takes to grow, I mean, up to a year in our process, uh, negates that sustainability aspect of the product. I mean, there are a finite amount of natural gemstones, and they aren't being reproduced. So just in that explanation, you can't claim sustainability because it's not being replaced. And there'll come a time, and I have it in magazine quotes from 10 years ago from spokesman, I don't know, from De Beers, or the editor got the information from the other producers. De Beers, Argyle, Canada, Russia, all the producers said that they envision a day in the next 50 years where it will not be profitable enough to dig these expensive holes. And we've found just about every site there is on the earth through all their research, all the sites that they can reach. No doubt many of them under the oceans, but they can't reach them, can't find them. But there'll come a day when diamond is not widely available. New diamonds. I don't know. How to envision what will happen with the secondhand market. And De Beers tried to invent a secondhand market by buying up stones, and that didn't work. That was some years ago. They tried that in the U.S. What I'm getting at is sustainability means that you aren't diminishing the availability of a product in the future. And since there is no lack of the chemicals that we use, especially in diamond, carbon, the most common element, the product components are always there, always will be there. And I think there'll come a time when we won't even have to say we are more sustainable. It will just become apparent we're more sustainable. And I think that is what is going to happen in the diamond industry. Unlike emeralds, rubies, sapphires, that there's plenty of those out there, and there's plenty of deposits that haven't been developed. You can't say that with diamond. And every one of those holes has a life. Unlike the emerald, fields in Colombia. I mean, they've been mining those for 1,000 years. And having gone down in them, they're like a tunnel system that is unbelievable. You don't want to. They told me when I went down there, they said, "Don't wander around. We can lose you down here and not have the slightest idea how to find you." I didn't move, but it just it demonstrated how different the colored stone industry is, and how colored stones developed, and the mining of them and their sustainability. I mean, it's definitely there. More so than diamonds that have every one of those pipes that produces millions and millions of carats a year. I think it was 30 million a year for Argyle. It's now empty. They all have a life.
Sustainability in terms of the ethical production and also that they're better for the climate in terms of less carbon in extraction. Do you see that part of those two products as well?
Well, again, to make any claims like that, it takes a lot of third-party research to verify. Like a good friend of mine who I helped start up Diamond Foundry, I helped him in that I suggested that it was a good idea that he go ahead and try and make diamond, because if he was successful, he would be successful. And I've been approached by many people over the years that say they want to grow emerald or ruby, and I just say good luck, and there's more than enough room. I don't help them, but I encourage them, and I don't try and discourage them. I can't say that I wouldn't try and discourage some people now in the diamond industry because there's too many people that know how to grow diamond. Somebody leaked the information for sure on how to do it. And I warn my competitors, whom I visit frequently, I says, watch out, everybody has a price. Don't let your employees see everything you're doing. And that's what's happened. I use Mikimoto as an example. He kept that secret for 100 years on how to grow a cultured pearl until somebody got to somebody. And then the Chinese just wiped out the cultured pearl industry. Overproduction. And that's what the Indians are doing now, the Indians and the Chinese, with CVD diamond. There's, I think, 7,000 CVD labs in India and 6,000 in China. So anybody with a few $1,000,000 in their pocket is going out and buying the information and the equipment. They aren't really in the business, and they won't be in the business the way it's going. It's below cost of production. It will settle out. I mean, I've seen this happen before in emerald and ruby, and people, I mean, they could afford to lose the money. Like Kyocera of Japan has an emerald. We got into an emerald price war in the mid 90s, and people like Kyocera, which was worth like, I don't know how many, it might be evaluated at over $1 trillion. And I mean, they quit. They said, we're leaving the US. It's silly. I mean, in their emerald production. I mean, there are other electronic businesses, fine. So people who can well afford it, somebody like De Beers with the light box, they just spent, I think it was $90 million on a plant in Oregon. And I think what they're hoping, knowing them, is that, okay, we're going to disrupt the diamond industry in the jewelry field while we try and learn how to make diamonds better for other applications, electronics. I mean, it's most people don't realize how invaluable lab-grown diamonds are today in anything to do with mechanical. If you want to cut beryllium metal, you do it with diamond or you don't do it. It has totally shoved out the natural diamond as the best mechanical diamond to use in whether it be polishing, abrasives, cutting, machinery, anything that rubs on something else does it better with diamond. And the natural used to use the low-end board. It was totally included. It was uncuttable, and it didn't do that good a job when it came to the mechanics of using the hardness of diamond. And back in the 60s, people like General Electric, DuPont, some of the other companies, maybe Sumitomo Electric, they came out with, a lab-grown diamond that wasn't for the jewelry industry at all. I mean, I think it totals today about 6 billion carats a year that is produced just for the industrial market.
We were talking about that the knowledge of these sort of crystals and everything around us isn't quite so well known to the general public. It has been something that I have also sort of encountered, that many people still don't have any idea gemstones can be grown, even though sort of the first commercialization happened in the early 20th century. What do you think needs to be done in order for this gap in understanding and knowledge of the general public to be filled? Because you have, with the Chatham Company, certainly worked very hard on promoting the product and, marketing the products, engaging press, speaking to students. What more do you think needs to happen?
Make everybody get a degree in chemistry? I don't know. It That's the only way it's gonna happen. It's evidently, it's hard for people to comprehend what a gemstone is and how it forms, why it forms, and what it is. We seem to be more able to accept biological types of chemistry, organic chemistry, even though, we can't really, start playing with DNA if you're not in that field, but you kind of understand, what they're talking about. People don't seem to be able to get a handle on how we create an environment that nature grows a crystal. I mean, I just wrote to somebody in the industry, and it was probably on LinkedIn or one of those, which I do pop into occasionally. And I said, we don't jam carbon atoms together to make it look like diamond. We can't do that. Nor can we put the atoms together correctly by our hands doing it. I mean, we're talking about molecular levels, something that is preordained in chemistry. Unlike biological sciences, chemistry is really hard and finite, and certain elements at certain temperatures and pressures will do certain things every time, and it's preordained. I mean, it's a part of nature that is not very easily manipulated. I mean, you can't make weird combinations of crystals just because you want to. I mean, they just won't do it. They have developed. I mean, like the last 25 elements on the periodic chart are referred to as artificial because they are made from non-natural materials, or some of it is, and they come up with unnatural combinations of elements to create these new elements. That's an exception to the rule, but for the most part, and in the gemstone field, it's pretty absolute. And it's what I say to people who say, "Why don't you put a dopant in your crystals?" I said, "Well, why don't you grow emerald? It's not that easy, and we can't shove something in there that doesn't belong there. It's not that easy. And if we perhaps are successful in doing one of these things, we end up with a different compound. It's not an emerald anymore. So don't even talk to me about chemistry that you don't understand. It's not going to work."
I compared the methodology of crystal growth in flux, particularly with the methodologies underpinning what is now considered bio design and bio art, where designers and artists collaborate with nature to create materials and products. And you mentioned in your book that there is a big difference, and there is a YouTube video you shared with me as well that mentions the difference between Verneuil grown ruby and flux grown ruby. Are you happy to expand on this distinction? What are your thoughts on the commonalities between sort of growing design and crystal growth?
Yeah, that it is unfortunate. There are some materials, and sapphire, which is aluminum oxide, is one of those materials that has a very broad range of growth perimeters. And you can't produce an emerald this way. It will not form. But you can take aluminum oxide powder and melt it with a torch and get something that resembles a ruby. And it resembles it. And from a crystallographer's point of view, you go to YouTube and punch in Tom Chatham or Chatham rubies, you'll see me trying to demonstrate what the differences are without getting too involved in the chemistry of what the differences are in a flame fusion or Verneuil ruby and a Tchaikovsky pulled ruby or sapphire, and what Chatham flux is. And the flux process allows or causes or whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's identical to natural. The structure is identical. The structure in a Verneuil or Tchaikovsky stone is not identical. You can see it on the outside of the crystal. Doesn't have crystal faces. we first discovered this big difference, which we didn't really care about in the labs, but we used Verneuil material as seeds material to grow our ruby. And we could never grow a decent crystal out of it because of this corkscrew structure that we were trying to grow from. It just replicated that corkscrew. So the crystals came out, they didn't come out looking like a Verneuil carrot stick, They had crystal faces, but they were all disoriented and we could never make it work. And we turned to natural ruby to use the seed material. And then we started cutting our own material as seeds and got out of that problem. But it was definitely a problem in the beginning because the structure was not the same.
And so for these materials all to be classed under the same terminology is something you also point out in the book is slightly problematic. And you mention also the FTC case brought against you revolved around the terminology. You describe your emeralds at the time cultured to then move towards created. What are your thoughts on sort of the need of oversight in terminology of all these materials and the terminology currently being used in most advertising, natural, artificial, fake, synthetic, authentic, in relation to crystal materials?
Unfortunately, oversight is necessary. It's just the nature of people in marketing to keep pushing the envelope of explaining correctly and accurately what they're doing. It's an easy fault to fall into, to try and overemphasize, the eco-friendliness of your product, whatever, even though it's a lot better because of what we do in the laboratories versus what happens in any mining situations. It's got to be better. But unless you do detailed studies that are backed up, you can't say it. And that's why this oversight is necessary, because we would just run amok, most of us, with our claims and statements and what have you. So oversight is necessary. And you have to keep in mind that we are constantly being attacked by the natural industry. And not that I want anybody to feel sorry for them, because we're doing fine. But it isn't like we can just develop a product category and an understanding of our product category, because we have people on the other side trying to confuse the situation and make it look like we're lying or that we're misleading people. Like cultured, even though it wasn't and isn't my favorite word, in my father's opinion, that best described what he was doing in culturing emeralds. But it got into a court battle where he would have to disclose how he cultured this emerald. And he refused to tell it. It's a lengthy part of the book as far as my father's fight with the FTC and where created came from. And there was no doubt amongst these experts that were called in, like Richard Lidicote and Crowning Shield and some of the other people from around the world were called in by the government. And they said, "What does Chatham make?" And they all had to say emerald. Chatham creates emerald. And in later in chambers, the judge says, "Why don't you use Chatham Created?" That's where it came from. The judge. We had never thought of it. We had a list of 25 different words, and not created was among them. So, does it thoroughly explain what the product is? Probably not. But we've all come to agreement, except in France, that the word synthetic is confusing. And it's used correctly in many industries to describe something that has no natural counterpart. Our government has says, it's confusing. And that's where laboratory grown, came. Doesn't really explain what we do, but at least it takes us out of that fake and artificial realm.
So do you feel laboratory grown is a good word, preferred over created, or?
Actually, my company does prefer it over created. And I don't argue with them over it, and it's fine. It's just so we're clearly, denoting. And I get on my own company. I pull up new releases. I said, wait a minute, this looks so much like natural stone. You have got to explain what this is. And it's an easy fault to get into. My marketing people are good, but I said, don't forget, there's people watching us. And one slip, and you got the feds on your back. So that's what happened.
You mentioned the anti-created gem fraction in your book as well. You mentioned it's a political field. What do you think are really the main motivations? Could you share a few of the strategies that they've tried to sort of use against your business, and what it felt like to be continuously fighting this battle? You ended up keeping going. What kept you going?
Their motivation is greed. They want the market for themselves that they've had for hundreds of years to remain their market and not share it. We have cannibalized part of the natural market, the low end part of the market, the stones that cannot be sold now that are so poor in color or quality. But even then, that they want that too. They don't want to give anything away. And what is the incentive or the drive to keep doing this is exactly their actions. When somebody keeps poking you, at least in my experiences personally, I don't back down. If you leave me alone, I might forget all about you. But if you keep poking me, I'll fight back. So a lot of people are that way in our industry. I mean, it is not overwhelming, and it doesn't take anything out of us to have these things argued about, and to me, it just fuels, our position and helps us in a way. So, and I think most of my fellow crystal growers are the same way because they're knowledgeable and they're well educated, and they can. I mean, nobody likes to hear somebody malign somebody else erroneously. To say your stones are fake. Well, they're not fake. I mean, I have an issue right now with the ISO people in Geneva. They came out with the definition of what a laboratory diamond is. And when I read it, I went to them immediately. And what it reads is that a laboratory diamond, grown diamond, is artificial. So I went to the people in Geneva who run the ISO. And I said, where did you get this definition? You didn't approach anybody in my industry for this definition. He said, well, we had this guy in the UK do it, Harry Levy. I said, Harry Levy? Harry Levy is a diamond sight holder, natural diamond sight holder. You had him write this? I said, I tell you what, if we get in a court fight because someone doesn't like our language and they pull up this ISO ruling definition of our stones being artificial, I'm going to subpoena you and you're going to have to defend your position. It's no. Go talk to Harry Levy. I went to talk to Harry Levy. I know him. He passed away now, but I knew him. I said, Harry, what do you get off with this? Well, that's the way I feel, Tom. I said, well, that might be the way you feel, but it's inaccurate. And it still exists today. And I still haven't been able to change it. But it's that kind of thing. It just fuels the fire.
Do you still have an interest in and sort of keep abreast of innovations related to laboratory grown gemstones outside of the innovations your company is obviously creating and investigating? And if so, where are you looking for them? Have you seen anything that you think will be exciting for the future?
I have, but I can't share it with you. Well, I do. Whenever I travel, and I don't travel as much as I used to, but I used to travel a lot and working in Russia and Ukraine and China and Japan, people would invite me into their labs, and I would always warn them. I says, "I cannot reciprocate. No one is allowed outside of our family in the labs." And they said, "No, no, we'd love you to show you, what we're doing." I says, "I'd love to see it." And I am the worst person in the world that you should allow in your crystal growing laboratories, because I can tell in a second exactly what you're doing, what components you're using, it just, because I know it. So I've learned a lot. As much as they try to keep it hidden, when I see something that I really shouldn't see, I learn from it. But I don't. I also don't share it, and which I've tried to warn people in my business. I said, somebody got to somebody in the diamond business because there's too many growers out there. There are no books on how to grow a diamond, but there are definitely people out there that know how to grow a diamond. And that's why this industry is so overproduced, because word got out and nobody was careful. I said, in our laboratories, and it really irritates people with a PhD. They come to us with a chemistry background, and I'm very close to Silicon Valley. There's a lot of bright people down here, Stanford University. They come to me and say, "I have a degree in chemistry, like a job." I said, "You're the last person I'd hire." "What?" I said, "Yes, I don't want another employee for life." And that's what you turn into. I said, "We hire people that do not have an education, especially in chemistry. And we don't let them see everything we do. And whatever chemicals they're working with, they don't know what they are. We just number the bottles or the cans or whatever and say, put in 1,500 grams in unit number 26, at 3 o'clock today." That's all I need to know. We've never had a leak in 80 years.
It's kind of sad that trust isn't something that comes natural to people, and that's not a world we live in. But I understand there is a necessity in terms of business to think that way.
You gotta, yeah.
It's not a common thing for it to be published in research, is it? In terms of, you're not looking at certain journals that are interesting, or it's really talking to people. That's how you find more interesting innovations.
I like my competitors, and I try and, be friends with them. Sometimes they're a little concerned that I approach them. They said, "Do I need my attorney present?" And I said, "No, this is not that kind of a call. It's a social call, you know." And I try and give advice where I think it's needed for my own good, so they don't make the same mistakes we made, or sell to certain sectors of the industry that we know aren't good. And I can help them in that respect.
How would you like to see the industry evolve in relation to the topic of man-made gemstone materials?
Oh boy, that's a real loaded question. It's a tough one to answer, because I've been involved in the evolvement of this industry for so long, and I've never seen an end to it. That it's hard to answer, but I hope, I would hope that in the future, through whatever process that occurs, that people do get a better, fair understanding what a lab grown gemstone is and is not. I mean, there are certain things that it is not, and it didn't come out of the ground, but it is still grown by nature. It's that hard distinction to make and to explain, but it would be nice. And there's a lot of people in the industry that thoroughly understand what we're doing. I mean, that's because of our educational efforts over the years, and it does work one by one. So that's, hopefully more people, I mean, there are a lot more people out there than you think understand it, because we sell a lot of stones, hundreds of thousands of stones every year. And they're not staying in the stores, they're being sold. So people are getting an explanation of what it is. And some people reject it, and some people thoroughly understand it. And, it grows every year, acceptance, and that, nothing was, built in a day.
The Chatham story is one of perseverance, dedication, and innovation. With crystal growth, thriving innovations in a range of industries, it is surprising that the jewelry industry remains apprehensive about these materials and the fascinating technologies and processes underpinning them. For being a driving force for change and taking the time to write down the story of his family's legacy, so we have an account of history in the subject, and for speaking to me today, I would like to thank you very much, Tom. We're very grateful for your time and your efforts.
You're welcome.
Next month, I'll be joined by another guest, so watch this space to find out who it is. But for now, this was Sophie Boons for the BAJ podcast episode exploring the Chatham Legacy with Tom Chatham. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.